Oh, shit. I just tried to do the intro noise.
Yeah, let me hold that.
And I realised that the glass wine stopper is still on.
Yay.
As if.
That was a nice noise, though.
Well...
The sort of, like, pop noise.
So we're recording our second
Yeah, these ones are
podcast
always messy.
of the night. And I'm still on my rosé, and honestly, I think the reason I liked it is because it was cold, and now it's starting to go, you know, the chill's being taken off it a bit now, and it's not nice.
Oh.
So,
Why are you drinking it?
Because I don't have any other alcohol up here, and I'm not gonna go downstairs. So, if anyone's listening and you saw my tweet of what we're drinking tonight, so Jess is drinking Smirnoff Ice with extra vodka.
Absolutely.
And I'm drinking this rosé, you'll know that the rosé bottle looks incredible.
The bottle is making up. Is the bottle making
no,
up
it's
for
fucking,
the wine?
No,
oh, okay.
No, it's not. And I saw that bottle in, is it Asda or Morrison's?
It was Asda. It's like the bottle's like overcompensating for something.
Yeah. It's a beautiful bottle. I would like to keep the bottle, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's just not good. Okay, so welcome to the Wandering Women podcast, series 2, episode 7. We are going to be talking about freedom of speech.
Which is very current right now.
It's always fucking current though, isn't it?
It's raging at the moment, though, this debate around freedom of speech again.
I just want to start with something. And I think we need to say this before we do a podcast on this, and that is that to anyone listening to this and anyone who's interested in freedom of speech, especially if you're like feminist or left wing, you need to go and find Pragna Patel's speech on taking back freedom of speech, and I think it's called Let's Own Freedom of Speech.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Is that the speech we saw her give?
One of them.
Yeah. Where were we? Where she gave that speech and we were there.
Woman's Place? I want to say Woman's Place.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Philia, was it? No, it was Woman's Place.
No, she's been at... We saw her Philia, Woman's Place, Philia.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
She is, absolutely. She's just one of those speakers that you just like, your jaws like open and you're just like, oh my God, they're so clever.
She is so
intelligent.
She's so clever and so diplomatic.
And so articulate.
And articulate and measured and interesting. But like, she's all of that, but she's also still interesting to listen to.
She's so bright.
Like, she's more than bright.
Just, yeah. Okay, well, yeah, so we've decided to do a discussion on freedom of speech. And so we've set like some questions that we thought we might discuss. And I thought I'd start off by asking Jaimi, what is freedom of speech to you? How do you understand it?
So freedom of speech, well, to me, it's not really, like, freedom of speech is the freedom to be able to say, not necessarily act one, but be able to say anything. That doesn't necessarily mean freedom from consequences, but it, that includes everyone who you don't agree with and everyone who you don't like. That they should also be able to say things. Yeah.
I actually agree with that. I think freedom of speech can become a really contentious issue. People feel very uncomfortable around this, but every now and then you see people share posts or talk about almost like the approach that you can't be completely pro freedom of speech unless you'll also defend the right of somebody that you actually don't like or you don't like their views, for them to be able to say it too. Because if you're pro freedom of speech but only for the things that you agree with, then you're not pro freedom of speech.
No, exactly.
You live in an echo chamber and you're just interested in sort of propagating your own views, really, and sort of spreading them. But freedom of speech, to me, is the same as Jaimi. It's like, it's that freedom to be able to talk, discuss, say things that, people might not like, or that might make people uncomfortable, or that might be contentious, or might be going against the norms or against
It
the
might be
status
outright
quo.
horrific as well.
Yeah, because see, that's the other end of it, isn't it? Is that freedom of speech also includes people's right to be able to say something horrendous.
Yeah.
And so, at the moment, there are a lot of arguments going on in academia, in society activism, feminism, all sorts of sort of sectors really about what is freedom of speech and where I don't know, is there like an imaginary line in the sand where you cross over it and then it's abuse, or you cross over it and then it's bigotry, you cross over it and then it's hatred? Should it be allowed? Should it not be allowed? And I find that really interesting because I think it actually is a symptom of a society that's not very mature.
I think unless you're saying, like, everyone should go and commit this crime, and if you don't, I will do this to you. That's the only thing you shouldn't be able to say. Everything else,
direct incitement.
Yeah, but proper direct, because everyone else, unless you've been being coerced or manipulated or whatever, everyone else, you're an adult, you make your own decisions, and if you do something, then that's you have to deal with the consequences.
So do you believe that governments or institutions should have any power over freedom of speech of the people?
In what way?
Do laws against it, or
say
they
should
allowed
uphold
to discuss
freedom
this,
of speech?
Or
no, I don't believe. I think you should be able to discuss whatever you want, because the thing is, one of the arguments that people say is oh well, if we ban talking about this, if we banned talking about racism, it doesn't mean that we don't live in a racist society or, have racist structures or whatever. So it will always come out. Unless we tackle these issues at the root, simply not talking about them isn't going to solve anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my view. You've got to be able to allow discussion in order to counteract what, if you don't agree with those views, you've got to be able to have the discussion to counteract them and to show other people why they're wrong.
And how to do it.
Yeah,
if
how
you know
to
what
do
I mean,
it.
how to have those discussions. I'm trying to think while you were talking, I'm trying to think of a view or something that someone could say that would actually make me think, oh my God, they shouldn't be allowed to say that.
I think there are certain people who you shouldn't be allowed to say things to, like children and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. What do you mean?
Well, they're impressionable and don't have full, any autonomy really.
So let's give an example. So say for example, you shouldn't be allowed to, I don't know, say to a child over and over again that certain groups of people I don't know, deserve to die, or less than other people, or they're not worthy of respect. Because I'll tell you something now, that shit's happening.
I wasn't, not so much that, no, because exactly that already happens, and I actually think we're in a really, I'd like to think that we're in a really strong position where children who are growing up in racist families, I think we are seeing that racism for the first time ever being challenged.
What, by them going to school or having friends or TV or media or something?
Exactly that. And they are actually challenging the families. But yeah, I think there's some things that, but I guess it's safeguarding really. Things like, we wouldn't allow children's TV shows to include pro-rape.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Things like that.
So under freedom of speech, would we allow adult programming? to include pro-rape view. I don't know why we're even arguing some of this, because like these views actually already are in the mainstream. So for example, you had that guy, didn't you? What's his bloody name? Milo, what's it? And he went around selling tickets to pro-rape seminars and conferences that taught men how to rape in different countries and avoid the law.
Oh my god!
And he sold tickets in every country. He was like really famous. He was a YouTuber and
an
influencer
I know who he is.
Stuff. And you know, he wasn't pulled up by any freedom of speech laws, which is really interesting.
But the reason he was able to be so successful is because those views already existed.
Yeah, people basically didn't see them as offensive enough to even like pull up freedom of speech or anything. And to say that that's sat outside of it.
And has society been worse off from him? Would society be better off without that particular individual? No. Because those things are already in place, those structures are already in place.
Yeah,
the patriarchy is already there. He is not making any difference.
It was stupid to think that he was like the sole agent of that.
Yeah. So by taking away his right to freedom of speech, we're not actually helping anything. And if anything, it would just make the case for his opposition, like, less.
I also think that there's no true power over freedom of speech, which means that you can try and shut down debate, you can try and silence people, but all you'll do is force them to talk somewhere else or talk in a way that you've not considered. And then that will be, you know, that potential discussion will get shoved underground or shoved somewhere that you can't monitor it or shoved somewhere that you can't really counter it anymore. And that's counterproductive, especially when you're trying to, you know, change views in society to make them safer or to make them more equal and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people sort of talk about, oh, you'll just push it further underground. I don't really agree with that. Like, North Korea, from the few people who've managed to, like, you know, escape or whatever, conversations aren't happening. People are so fearful of their lives. They are so fearful that their houses are bugged. They're not even having the conversations.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, no, that's interesting, because there was that girl, wasn't there, that escaped North Korea that spoke about...
And she came through, she went through China to get to the US.
Yeah, and she was saying that you can't even, criticise the films.
Yeah.
That they watch, because there's only certain films we're allowed to watch, and she was saying, you were not allowed to even talk about, for example, American films.
Yeah.
And she was saying...
And people are so scared.
And she was saying as well that, neighbours ratted on each other and stuff, out of fear.
Yeah. So, I don't think the argument, I don't like the argument, it'll just push it further underground for anything, really. I think it's a cop-out.
Do you?
Yeah, I think it's a cop-out for a lot of things. Okay, let me ask you a question. Okay. Who currently has power over freedom of speech?
Well, I think that the long arm of the law is getting a bit fucking long around this. So freedom of speech has suddenly become everyone's fucking domain. It's like universities are clamping down on what you can talk about. You know, employers are clamping down on it. The police are getting involved. It's not even a crime. Police are arresting people, threatening them if they say something on Twitter they're not allowed. Threatening them for sharing a joke that someone doesn't like. And
the thing is, right, a lot of our listeners will be thinking about sort of the gender debate, but
it's broader than that.
But right, look at when a woman's accusing a man of rape or domestic violence. They are not allowed to say that shit.
Yeah, it's not freedom of speech.
No, it's not. They get threatened by the police. They get threatened by their workplace. They get threatened by if they're in school or their university.
Yeah, absolutely. They're silenced.
They literally are, and they have there's hardly any freedom of speech when it comes to women calling out abuse.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sorry, I just
No, I totally agree with that, and that's what I mean about, you know, there's this sort of. This power has been overextended, actually. It's we've got institutions, companies, media, the bloody NHS wading into it. You've got so many different authorities and organisations now suddenly deciding that they're the bloody, you know, oracle on freedom of speech and what people can say and what they can't say and what words they're allowed to use, what phrases they're allowed to use. And I just think that we're going backwards. I think that like we're not getting anywhere by being told you're not allowed to say that anymore. You've got to use this word. You've got to do that now. Otherwise,
but I think
you're a bad person.
I think that's very different though. Like when people are like, "Oh, they won't let us use the N word anymore."
Oh,
like that's so different to the sorts of things today where people are trying to have actually quite measured political discussions and they get told that they're not allowed to say it, right? Is the issue that we're having is the two meanings of freedom of speech. So you've got the people who want to be racist.
Yeah, you've got
the people who want to have academic debate.
Yeah, you've got the people that want freedom of speech because they want to be horrible bastards. And they think they want full protection from it. They want to be able to say abusive
without any consequence.
Yeah, threatening language where, and then go, "Oh, well, it's my freedom of speech. I can threaten an 18-year-old on Twitter if I want, where actually it's very clearly a crime."
No, but I more mean like oh, PC gone mad, like all of them lot. It's more those who want to use the N-word, who want to call gay people faggots and all stuff like that, and like, oh, freedom of speech. And then they expect that, to be able to get a job.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Right? When all over their social media is something, you're not going to want to employ that sort of person because they'll be dealing with the general public, they'll have colleagues, and they don't want to take that person on.
Yeah.
Which is very different to saying you're not allowed to have this view on this particular political issue, right? Like, I'm a socialist, but I'm not gonna be like, oh, capitalism is inherently exploitative, so if you're a capitalist, you deserve to be no platformed.
Yeah, and that's the way we're heading. It's sort of like...
It's more than that, but so much so that we're doing it in like this neoliberal way where capitalist companies are sort of pretending to not be pro-capitalist, but they are inherently, because they're like multinational corporations who avoid paying tax, but they're like, oh, we support LGBT.
Yeah, it's totally...
And then they're being like, oh, we do not want homophobes buying our products.
Oh, no, what a
and
load
it's
of
like,
shit.
Like, you're selling products in Dubai, like...
I know, yeah, don't throw
just
stones
stop
if
it.
you live in a glass house,
and it's becoming
prick.
like... It's just becoming this, like, rainbow capitalism.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think you're right. There's a lot of that like sort of what I would like. I'm not saying this in a professional way, but like what I see is like showboating going on, like jumping on a bandwagon to make yourself look more inclusive and whatever.
People want to feel like they're making a difference as well. So they say things like, "We demand that you remove this person as a speaker," right? And then this like little fucking company on Twitter gets bombarded with 1,000 Twitter accounts and think that the world's ending.
And everything.
Yeah, and think that the world's ending because an echo chamber clone in on them.
Yeah, no. That's absolutely...
And then they shit themselves and then deplatforms. No platform, deplatform? Is deplatform a word?
Both.
Take it away from them.
They're both valid. I've had loads of experience of this, like being told off for saying something that I've then challenged. Like, I've an example where I lectured at a university and I was asked to lecture the doctoral programme on critical perspectives of mental health and psychiatry. So I did. You know what I mean? Because I am anti-psychiatry. I am critical of the mental health movement. I do think that there's things going wrong. And, I had the evidence. It was all peer-reviewed studies. It was for, a Russell Group university. And then, like, after I'd delivered it, I then got taken to one side and was like, never say that in this university ever again. I was like, say what? And they were like, views about anti-psychiatry. I was like, that's what you fucking asked me to deliver. And they were like, well, you weren't supposed to say, that there was
let
evidence.
the students make their minds up.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, but they're on a doctoral programme.
If they can't fucking research.
Exactly. If they can't fucking handle that there is a massive literature base against psychiatry and bullshit diagnoses, and then you're going to come and take me to one side and be like, you're never allowed to say that ever again because you've got to protect the poor students. You can fuck off. And I never ever lectured there again.
But imagine paying to study a doctorate and then finding out that your institution is keeping information from you.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I went to a debate, right, with my friend Mandeep, and we were away. I know. I would say shout out Mandeep, but I'm not even going to pretend she fucking listens to me. Fucking hell, you're lucky if she texts you back, let alone fucking get her listening to a podcast. Anyway, yeah, we'd gone away together to Hay on Wye Festival, and we went and listened to this bloke have a so-called debate about whether adults should be able to have sex with kids. And me and Mandeep just sat there. Mandeep's a social worker, and we just sat there. Like, at the time, we probably only known each other about 3 or 4 years or whatever, and we were staying there for the week. And we just sat there and we're like listening to this debate, and we're both like, is this what we agreed to sit through? I don't remember this being on there. And basically, this man was saying that he'd been to some fucking tribe somewhere where he claimed that they were all having penetrative sex with children from 3 and up because they believed that it caused puberty. And his view...
What?
Oh, I don't know whether he was even telling the truth, to be honest with you. He was a fucking woke, fucking white guy who was basically like pro-paedophilia. Anyway, his argument was that he said, in the limited amount of time that he stayed there, bearing in mind he didn't speak any of their languages whatsoever, he said that he didn't think those kids were traumatised from being essentially raped from being 3 all the way through to young adulthood. And that he says that those children developed perfectly fine.
But, Mr. Sir, would you have sex with a 3-year-old? And if the answer is yes, then you are a pedo.
To be honest with you, the debate me and Mandeep watched sounded very much like he was saying that he thinks that sex with like toddlers is fine.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And then there was obviously the opposing... I guess the reason for this story is that there was also opposing arguments on the stage.
Yeah.
So there was other academics being like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is just straight up paedophilia dressed up as research. And that debate was important. You know, there was a good few hundred people in that room. We took Q&A at the end. I questioned him twice. I remember being nervous. I remember pulling him up on his arguments and sort of saying to him, how can you prove that those kids weren't traumatised if you have like no understanding of their culture or their language? You're going to claim to me that you've, you know, spent enough time with them to know whether those children are showing trauma responses. You're not going to know that. And I was sort of arguing with him about, how do you know that it's not so normalised that the children don't even know how to respond to the fact that adults are raping them? And, you know, that debate was extremely sensitive. It was heated. There were people arguing on the stage, arguing in the audience, but it was well maintained.
Right, I just want to say, just whilst I remember, there's an argument where people will be, oh yeah, but it'll normalise it, right? If you heard someone talking about how it's fine to have sex with 3-year-olds, would that normalise it for you? No, it fucking wouldn't. And if it would, then there's something wrong with you. People are so quick within like the freedom of speech debate to get scared that things will be normalised.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear.
Things will be, you know, taken more seriously or given more airtime, right? And if you think that that's a concern, then actually the concern is with society, and it's already like that if there's a concern. And you've got to think about yourself as well. Like, would listening to people speak all day about how it's okay to have sex with 3-year-olds make you think it's okay to have sex with 3-year-olds? Like, it's not even as a joke. Like, no, it wouldn't.
No, of course.
And if it would, then
like, the issue already lay within
then
you.
is with you, and it you need to just quite frankly lock yourself up.
The point of like my story was essentially that I actually thought that was a very well managed debate. There was a good chair, you know, for the debate.
Did he get his arse handed to him?
Yeah, he did quite a bit.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
did.
So getting your arse handed to you, so that anyone who might be having those thoughts brewing can see that man coming out with this this horrific shit, getting his arse handed to him academically, with well-reasoned arguments.
Yeah, publicly. In a public debate that's been allowed to occur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is going to do anything but normalise it.
Yeah,
it's going to be like, what the fuck?
It was just a really, I was really pleased to be able to be at something like that.
It deals with issues like at the core
Head
as
on.
well.
Yeah, right in front of everybody, like almost in like a transparent way.
Yeah.
Where like, say for example, you've got someone who wants to, I don't know, fucking stand up and say that certain groups of people, I don't know, don't deserve to be in certain jobs, or they don't deserve an education. Instead of silencing them, get them on a fucking stage. Go on then, mate. Go and back it. Look, I tell you what, you've got 15 minutes. Do your TED talk.
Yeah.
And then we'll do a Q&A at the end and see whether you can stand up to any form of evidence or reasoned debate. And that is the way I would want
even
society
Trump didn't win the popular vote first time when he even when he even was made president. Still didn't win the popular vote.
No, I know.
So more people didn't agree with him than did.
And it's not to ignore the fact that propaganda is powerful, and like people talking on platforms, it is powerful, like whatever. But there is no way that you can control some of these views that already exist in the world and are actually heavily embedded in the world by pretending that these conversations aren't even happening, and then just silence it and scare people and threaten them and stuff like that. Like, also, what you've got to remember, for those of you that are in like certain debates at the moment that are extremely toxic, right, is that their power is only as strong as your fear. If you're not fucking scared, then it doesn't make any difference what they threaten you with, does it? So, for example, like, I get threatened all the time about talking about this sex and gender debate, and I would say I'm quite neutral on some of these things. Where, for example, I absolutely disagree with gender theory and gender ideology, but I absolutely support the right for people, to be able to live and present how they most feel comfortable, and that they should be respected, they should have human rights. There's no question of that. There's never going to be a question of that. But, at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, the theories and ideologies around gender are theories and ideologies, and therefore they are up for debate. They're up for debate, they're up for discussion. Some people will agree with them, some people will disagree with them. They will come from different perspectives. Some people will, for example, some people might disagree for a really disrespectful reason, for an actual hatred reason, for like a discriminatory reason. But some people might disagree from an academic perspective, or from an evidence-based perspective, or from some sort of experiential perspective.
And you've got to have these discussions so that you can look at all of the reasons people might not agree.
Yeah, completely. And I just think
not agreeing, for example, not agreeing with the mental health movement doesn't mean that you think people should man up, and it doesn't mean and it doesn't mean that you think that mental health is made up. It could mean that you think that we give people medication when we should be giving them support, because it's a cheap fix in a Tory world where we use a medical model.
And I think people stop talking to each other. They just shout at each other, and they don't. And it's like they shout at each other at the same time
without listening.
Yeah, nobody listens to the other side of the argument. So Jamie's just given a really good example there. So like, I'm like openly anti-psychiatry and have a lot of critical views around mental health, psychiatric diagnosis, medication. And what I get sometimes is people completely ignoring all my arguments and say things like, so you believe that, that people aren't suffering, that mental health issues aren't even real? I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they're overdiagnosed and they're positioned as some sort of like illness inside the brain that needs medication. And
even though there is no scientific evidence for that whatsoever.
Exactly. It's like, so obviously people struggle.
Proof.
Obviously people have things like flashbacks, low mood, anxiety, bad sleep and nightmares and
harmful behaviours.
Yeah, and all sorts of, exactly, right. But do
trauma
I believe...
responses, coping mechanisms.
Yeah, but do I believe that it's some sort of disorder that lives inside their brain because they've got a chemical imbalance and they need to take sertraline every day? No, don't. Like, so it's the fact that people aren't listening. People aren't even debating about the same things anymore. They're just yelling at each other. The other thing that's happened in the freedom of speech debate is, oh my God, which pisses me off, catchphrases. People just yell catchphrases at each other now about, like, big social issues. Nobody's even listening to each other. Like, people just yell, like, these phrases at each other with, like, no meaning.
Yeah,
and then when you try
and
dig into the meaning of them, no one knows what they're on about. What about, okay, can you think of any topics for you that would be, like, off limits?
Nope.
Can you think of any topics of freedom of speech that would make you uncomfortable? To be, like, in a room whilst it was being debated or discussed?
The paedophilia stuff that we mentioned, it would make me uncomfortable. Like, more than uncomfortable.
But would your discomfort be enough for you to cut? So, say for example, you were still at uni. You're back at uni years ago, and they've put this speaker on who's pro paedophilia. Like, is that enough for you to be like, fuck them? They shouldn't be allowed a platform. Don't let them speak. Right.
So I do sort of have an issue with sort of the university thing. I have like two different perspectives on it. One is that, imagine if you, for example, and this is like a real thing that happened, I think it might have been at my university actually.
Yeah, it was. I know exactly what you're going to say, and it was at yours.
Yeah.
Ours.
Imagine you're like a black student and you are paying to study at this institution and they're supposed to support you, make you feel safe, you know, and whatever. And then they create a space for a really racist speaker. How do you, like, how are you meant to feel as a student, right? But then, at university, you're encouraged to read and study all different perspectives.
Yep.
So you can argue against it. Why is it any different someone saying that compared to someone...
To you reading it?
Like, I do not think we should pay for speakers at universities. They should not be paid, right? But it's not... We need to not see it as giving them a platform. We need to see it as
like
us...
discussing a topic.
Well, not even discussing. We need to see it as us learning what the fuck is going on in their brain so that we can... argue against it most effectively. Because one of the issues we're having is that so many arguments are going on where neither side are actually arguing against what the other side is actually saying.
Yeah, no, I know, I totally agree with that.
So, because we're not listening to each other, because we won't give each other, like, a platform, like, or we like, I'm not reading that, I don't agree with it, or I'm not listening to that, I don't agree with it, you actually end up arguing with sensationalised memes.
Oh, God, I know.
And neither of you are saying that.
Arguing at cross purposes.
Yeah.
Where you're, like, both saying stuff to each other that, like, none of that is related to what the other person just, like, argued.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, like, who was that dude that I bought his book? Eddie... No, what was his name?
Yeah, it is. Eddie Stark.
I don't want to say his name because he's wrong. But basically, he's the dude last year that wrote a book called Privileged Victims. Yeah. And he believes that white men are the most oppressed group in the world, and that victims of rape, women predominantly, are the most privileged group in the world, and they have the most rights and the most respect and the most support and so on. So they actually have the most privilege in society. And I remember just seeing his tweets and his work, and then he had this huge piece in the New York Times. And I just remember thinking, what the fuck is this guy on? And we could have called for him to be no platforms. We could have stuck the boot in. We could have said, you know, who is this idiot? He's causing a load of harm to rape victims, because he was. But instead I bought the book, which a lot of people are going to say, oh my God, why did you buy the book? You've just given money to this creep, whatever.
Eddie Scary.
Eddie Scary, that's his name. And, like, the reality is, no, I wanted to see what he was arguing, I did.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out what his arguments were and what evidence base he had for them. And so, like, that book, you remember me reading it last summer. I had to read it, like, 3 pages at a time. I had to have a fucking break. The stuff that he was coming out with. I mean, like, But I still...
But that makes you so much better when you're trying to argue against it.
Yeah, because... And I feel really strongly about this, and that's why I have so much knowledge of the pro-paedophile movement, because for 2 years I followed it. And I didn't necessarily engage with it, but I read and I followed some of the most active pro-paedophile forums and Twitter accounts and websites, and I just watched videos and read comment threads and like of people being pro-paedophile, their arguments around pro-paedophilia. I followed pro-paedophile academics. I fell down a rabbit hole basically, and it was because I was so I just wanted to know what on earth, how had they all found each other, and why were they all arguing that the age of consent should be dropped to 5 and things like that. And it was, I don't want those voices silenced. I want them forced out into the open, because how else are we supposed to argue back? Ideally,
not exist at all. But unfortunately, we live in a patriarchy. We live in, massive power structures. But they exist. They will exist until there is huge societal reform on, a global industrial scale. We can't push them underground, because that's how we've ended up with massive secret paedophile rings.
Yeah. And they're actually extremely powerful.
Yeah, of course they are.
A lot more powerful than people want to believe.
Yeah, and that's not a conspiracy theory. You told me about paedophile information exchange, and then fucking Harriet Harman.
Yeah.
It's just there for the public to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't know, Google paedophile information exchange, or PI, and then Harriet Harman, who was deputy Labour leader under Ed Miliband, was part of it.
In fairness,
there
were a lot of...
but Harriet Harman really surprised me.
Yeah, there were quite a lot of powerful sort of politicians and people in authority that were part of PI, and still
Theresa
are.
May.
Theresa May, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Theresa May sort of famously argued that paedophiles should be allowed to adopt children from care, because she argued that they should be able to have their own children and so on, without that being seen as a safeguarding issue, which baffles the fuck out of me. But again, this is one of the things where I think that we should be debating that. We should be what's the point in people going, no, don't platform it, don't talk about it, let's not have that discussion. I teach social work students, psychology students, policing students. They should be having that fucking debate.
They need to have it.
Yeah,
because
do.
They need to be prepared for when they go out into the world.
But they also need to know where they stand. If you don't give them the chance to have these horrible debates. I was teaching master's students a couple of years ago, and I made them have a debate about whether they believed that sex offenders were essentially born evil, or whether they, became sex offenders for some reason. And there was a few students that were like, I'm not having this debate, I think this is really offensive. And I was like, I don't care. I had several conversations with them around you don't...
How can they say it's offensive? They're studying psychology.
No, specifically studying forensic psychology. And when I asked them all what they wanted to do, a lot of them said they wanted to be offender psychologists. I was like, if you can't have this discussion, you're not going to do very well in a prison. With men, sitting with you. The man that sat with me when I interviewed him, and I got halfway through an interview, and then he just randomly started trying to intimidate me and telling me about his crimes, and that he'd cut this woman up with a machete. And I was just sat in this little room thinking, brilliant, great, let's deal with this idiot now. I don't get. It's like you said, and I said this to you. It's what are we doing with, especially in universities and with students and in the media? What are we protecting them from? Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Let them give them a really controversial topic and make them think about it. The more you're exposed
to it, the harder you work.
I think you end up a better rounded thinker.
Yeah, you do.
Even if you get... So say, for example, that you were exposed to somebody's freedom of speech that disgusted you. Mm-hmm. At least consider why it's disgusted you, why you disagree.
Yeah.
On what basis do you disagree? Are there any bits of it you agree with?
On that.
Yeah. And consider your own views and your own biases, your own judgments, your own theories. We're not going to get anywhere by just going, no, we're not talking about that.
Yeah. Going back to racism as an example... we can only become like more eloquent and more effective as anti-racists when we can directly argue and shut down racism with the best like evidence and arguments we possibly can. And we can only do that through finding out exactly what their arguments are. And yes, it's fucking awful that we have to listen to these people and that these people are saying these things, but it's not as bad as having to, as like, for example, just black people having to deal with it by themselves. Yeah. And then nothing changing because no one really has the power to, because nobody has the critical thinking or the knowledge to. Or
courage. Because some of this, about this freedom of speech stuff, about shutting it down, is actually about fear of getting sued, fear of getting in trouble, fear of getting dragged through the press. And some of these organisations, authorities and institutions are actually, they're hiding behind the concept of freedom of speech so that they don't ever have to justify why they've allowed a debate to happen. You know, like, what, like, sort of like the, I don't know, angry people on the internet or the media going, why did you let that person speak at your event?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like, because they were talking about a topic and we wanted a debate in a Q&A? Like,
yeah.
Why not?
Exactly.
Like, yes, you don't like the topic, it makes you uncomfortable. Like, there's loads of things for, like, you know, I don't want to speak for you, babe, but, like, you know, there'd be loads of topics out there that, for me, as a lesbian, as a woman, and as someone that's been subjected to several different forms of violence, and all the things they've gone through.
Fucking let the homophobes speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Because so many people are like, oh, homophobia isn't even a thing anymore. Yes, it fucking is. Let them speak. Platform.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly how I feel about it. Like, let them fucking speak.
Like, I wouldn't be scared of that either. I might sit there thinking, fucking hell, this is horrible.
Yeah.
But, like, it's not going to kill me.
No, but also, it might help with people, like, people denying it happening. Because so many people deny that racism happens. So many people deny that misogyny happens. So many people deny that, like, homophobia happens. Right? But if we actually, you know, listen to the people who were saying it or whatever, we would see why it still happens.
Yeah, and it would be very clearly demonstrated.
Yeah. Okay, would you stand for the rights of someone to say something you don't agree with?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I would. But do you know why? Because I always have this thing in my head, and I've always had it, that if you try and shut up and silence someone that you don't like, that shit's going to come back round to you so fucking fast your head's going to spin. You think you're in the driving seat now, trying to shut up someone on the internet or shut someone up at an institution that you don't like, and then one day you might need to be able to talk about something or speak out about something or have an argument about something or debate something, and you are not going to like it. You are not going to like it when someone turns around and says, you're not allowed to say that or you'll get banned from here, or you're not allowed to say that or we'll sack you.
Yeah.
This has to work both ways. You are going to come across people who say stuff that make you very uncomfortable or actually really upset you, and they're valid feelings. That's okay. But
yeah, you're not allowed to fucking hurt anyone's feelings nowadays.
Yeah, you know.
But, like, people are totally fine with the way capitalism is, you know, exploiting all these people. But you're not allowed to talk about it.
There's so many. What worries me most about this whole topic is that there's so many issues and topics now that are almost going on this little list. Nope, can't talk about that. Nope, not allowed to talk about that either. Yeah. Oh, that's bigotry. That's hatred. That's not allowed on there. That's too critical.
And it's also polar. Like, it's either pro or anti. You're not allowed any sort of nuance around it.
Like, I think the same thing's happening about vaccinations. Where you've got, like, the absolute anti-vaxxers that, you know, literally believe that vaccinations will, like, cause all sorts of illnesses and stuff like that. And then you've got the people who are absolutely pro-vaccination. But then the people in the middle that were like really worried about going and getting their COVID vaccination were literally bullied on the internet.
Yeah, and now look at the Oxford vaccination and all the problems that it's had.
It was
but
like
no, it's not
you weren't
rushed.
even allowed to question it, were you, without
No.
getting trolled?
Yeah.
Which is terrifying, again, with that freedom of speech.
Especially in a Tory world when you've got left-wing people, like, not criticising the government. Anyway, that's all we've got time for.
I can't believe... That was a really interesting one.
I enjoyed that.
Oh,
Right.
quick.